Good morning. You're here with Between Us Girls, the Women of Dare Whimsy. We're a community for creative and gifted women. We gather together each Wednesday to have conversations about living this life adventure of being gifted and creative women, girls of all ages. Today our conversation is about the importance of creating consistently in your life and how we fit that into our schedule and why that matters for a creative or a gifted girl and what the value of it is as an adult girl or a child. Good morning. I'm Sweetie Berry. I'd love to tell you with you this morning, introduce you to some of our friends. Our first one that I'd like to introduce you to is Sarah Cook. Sarah is an author of Raising CEO Kids. She's the mother of 3 children in California. She is a creative. She's also a very talented author, speaker, and organizer. So she works on both sides of her brain. She has not only a creative side, but she works with systems management. So I'd love to introduce you to her this morning. And to start the conversation, Sarah, would you share about how are the ways that you find creativity to be important to your life?
Well, hello, I'm Sarah Cook. Thank you for introducing me. And I feel like creativity is really key in helping me to avoid stress. It's a really great outlet, whether it's dancing, whether it's painting, whether it's making a brand new recipe or creating a recipe, whether it's talking to a friend and sharing creative ideas about doing something fun in the house. It's really important to take that time to be creative, but like Sweetie talked about, it's really key that we put that in our schedule. So when you're looking at your weekly plan or your daily plan for the next day, it's important to look at, do I have something that will provide me a creative outlet? Do I have some time? Have I created margin for that creativity to come about? Because when we don't make time for something, we find that it doesn't end up showing up in our schedule. And we end up facing maybe burnout or frustration or stress or sickness. All of those come from a lack of creativity because creativity brings healing, it brings wholeness, it brings depth to our being, and allows for us to have a joy-filled presence in this journey called life.
I love that answer, Sarah. You know, part of me is a teacher, and part of me is a strategist, and a lot of me is a creative. And so as a creative, part of my income strategy is that I work with people to solve problems creating. But creating is more than income, and it is more than a product or an outcome. It is a process that frees our mind to think in new ways, to work out processes of grief, of joy, of happiness, of exploration, of discovery. And so creative becomes a very important part of my world personally, because there are so many parts of the day that I am creating with an end in mind. I have a product, either a writing or a program or a blueprint for a business. But the kind of creating I love the best is the kind that has no directed path, a creative place that allows me to just explore. You know, we are born into this world as learners. We naturally love to learn, and we naturally learn by existing. But when we put some intentionality behind it, some new tools such as paint or Play-Doh or cookbook ingredients like food ingredients, and we use our minds in new ways to develop delight, to develop just exploration, what can happen if we allow our minds to release and to be unstressed? Now sometimes we get so product driven, as in I need to make an A on the test, or I need to finish my house cleaning by this time, or I need to create a painting for such and such a client who's hired me to do so, that we forget the joy of creating consistently just for the joy of creating. I encourage people, as one of my friends, Ashley Alico, does, to have in their desk drawer, even at work, a little pad of paper, colored pencils, a stamp set. Currently at my home in Alabama, you can see that I'm doing a lot of projects for what's on the walls. But if you open my top desk drawer, there's a little stamp set that looks like it's for a child. And it has a ink blotter, and it has 2 or 3 little stamps. And what it is it's thumb people. They've given you an ink stamp with a thumbprint, and they teach you how to make thumb people. Well, let me tell you, I have had a cow's worth of fun doing thumb people on the side in 5-minute breaks when I'm doing a writing right now, because I'm writing on a big book. And for me to take a break from that for just 15 minutes of every hour, 5 minutes of it, I'm just stamping my thumb in different places on sheets of paper, the little pad I've bought for it, and I'm learning all kinds of ways. I've made snowmen out of my thumbs. I have made little ants. I've made turtles out of my thumb, you name it. I've just explored what can I do with something as simple as an ink pad and a little marker. And the little stamps actually have shoes on it. I've had more fun with those little shoes. They're little shoes, and in my mind, they're little red shoes. I always paint them red and then stamp it. But they have little red shoes. I've made caterpillars. I've made all kinds of things. And that may seem silly for a 50-year-old to spend her time when she's writing a book stamping. But you know what? That creative release makes me a better writer. It makes me a calmer human, and it makes me a happier person inside and out. I take time for that in my schedule. It's actually in my planner. If you look at my planner, even on my Google Calendar, for the public to see, it will say create space. And I don't mean go publish a book on Google. I mean time to just stop and enjoy creating. I don't have an agenda there. I may make a book, or I may make a card, or I may just do it for a mess and have fun to see what doesn't work as much as I have fun with what does work, because that's the joy of creating. Gail Roddy's with us from Minneapolis today. She's actually visiting in Arkansas. Gail, what's the role of creativity in your life, and how do you get it in? But just a moment, Gail. We need to get you unmuted.
There.
All right, now try.
It's so interesting as I listened to you and Sarah that you said so much of the things that I was thinking. And it is so important for creativity. It releases stress. It gives you a different perspective. And at my age, I thought I was not really a very creative person because I could get bogged down in the notion of creation means you have to have a product. Of a product. And that was after writing a book, creating a 501c3 from my kitchen table. I still didn't look at creativity as something that was day to day, that might be perceived as small. But as I was listening to you talk, I thought about how many times over the years I rearranged my furniture in my living room in the spring. And I do that because not only does it show to my brain the transition of the seasons, but it gives me a new perspective for the seasons. And something as simple as changing a bedspread in the springtime, it calms me. It makes me look at my house, which is as a woman, that's my nest, to look at it with a new appreciation. And all that is creativity and soothes me and makes me ready for the next step of whatever is coming in my life. So it's absolutely important, and it doesn't have to be something just overwhelmingly huge to be creative.
Well, the problem with being an audience is that you don't have the joy of the vision I have in person with some of my friends today, and I can tell you that Gail Roddy creates the most beautiful dinners and lunches and breakfasts every day. She takes amazing fresh vegetables, adds coconut oil in a skillet, and creates beauty on a plate. Not only is the food excellent to taste, and I'm not a vegan, and I'm appreciating this vegan recipes, but I'm also allowing myself to just take in how beautiful each dish is. She adds colors from multiple things. You would think she is a painter with food, and I know that the recipes that you'll get from her site that she shares so willingly are just amazing experiences in creativity, because you're not only going to have flavor sensation, you're going to have a visual sensation. That's really fun. I love Dr. Edith for so many reasons, but one of my most favorite reasons is she gives us permission to play. And part of the concept of creativity in your life is permission. Dr. Edith, can you share with us today what that looks like to you? And for some reason, there you go. For some reason, it wasn't coming right up. Good morning, Dr. Edith.
Good morning. Yes, I'm glad to be here with all the Dare Whimsy women. Creativity and permission to play is really, really important because you know, it doesn't matter what age you are, having fun and playing and dancing, as Gail says, dancing all over the place, jumping for joy and feeling okay about that's important. I love the excuse I have right now of having grandchildren because the children grew up. Well, that was almost disappointing in some ways because with grandchildren now, I get to play again and it's acceptable. And yet I have to give myself permission to play just whenever I want to. If that's going around the neighborhood and skipping for a while, or if it's going outside and just taking pictures because I've got a phone that takes pictures now. That's a new thing. It's a new toy for me as an adult. So giving myself permission to create in that sense of play, simplicity, excitement, and joy is so important for us to keep our balance and our health and satisfy that perspective of us. Play, exploration, new discoveries, asking why, being curious. It's all important in our personal growth and going ahead and exploring who we are and expressing who we are. So have some fun today. Let's play. Let's be creative.
I love that. You know, yesterday in Arkansas, we had about a third of the team of Dear Whimsy women, the women of Dear Whimsy, here in Arkansas. And we took a camera and we took a videography camera and we did some play. We did some very things for our websites and things that we needed for projects, but we took time to play too. We picked up favorite items, we hugged them, we took pictures of them, we played with each picture. We sometimes did silly poses, we sometimes hung upside down in wagons. We'd had time to play, and that's creativity too. But also, the creative process helps us work out grief, helps us work out sadness, helps us work out the feelings we have. Sometimes we're not even really aware that we're feeling a certain way till we start drawing or painting, and it comes out in our hands, and it comes out in what we create. You know, for me personally, when I work with students of all ages, whether they're 5 or 95, I find that creating together is another form of communication that allows us to draw closer. Just simply having the object in front of you, and so often laughter, because my stick figure are funny. They just are. And so having the laughter of experience versus inexperience, it's not a competition thing, it's an awareness thing. You know, you can almost see on paper sometimes in my classroom who thinks in what manner. Because the linear kids, the kids who are more in the analytical side of their brain, they draw, a slide followed by a swing set followed by the school entry to the gate. It's very linear in their drawings too. And the ones that live in whimsy, that live in creativity, they may have purple clouds and yellow raindrops, and their boots are upside down on their head coming out their ears. And that really helps us understand the beauty of the uniqueness of each of us, because we were born by a creative God, in my opinion. He just had to be a creative to create zebras in the same area he created, platypuses. There's just so much creativity going on in every facet of the seasons, of the weather, of the way we're built, of each baby, even identical twins, and how uniquely they are built with their personalities, even though they look like they're the same body. But creative consistently is a whole subject area of how creative women create space for mental health breaks, for fun breaks, for productivity breaks. Because if you want to get linear about it, I can talk to you about when we took away the playground from children in elementary schools, how test scores went down, how their maturity in handling relationships went down when we limited them to 20 minutes of PE time a day 3 times a week. We saw a different level of problem solving in mathematics scores by the end of 7 years. And now we're seeing schools, I saw one yesterday in Philadelphia that said, no more homework, no more staying in at recess. We're now going to have 3 play periods a day, and we're going to extend our school day, because the old model of school creatively had times for children to be children. But we somehow went into an industrialized version of education, and we kind of did in life. In the 80s and 90s and the early 2000s, life started giving the messages through television, radio, and publishing that the more you did, the better, smarter, better, bigger you were. And the truth is, the studies show that without creative play, without your version of creativity, whether it's singing, dancing, drawing, art, working with food, imagining, which is creative play too, time to imagine and brainstorm, we're less productive people. Guess what? The studies show that we're ready to have permission to play again and create again. And my question to you this morning, and I'm going to start with Lucy in just a few minutes. I didn't include her on the first round. Sorry for that, Lucy. But I'm going to go back and ask, how do you fit creativity in your life? Do you schedule it? Do you plan for certain times of the year? I know I have a weekend that's a long weekend, a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Monday, that I get together with girls, and all we do is create. We spend the whole year gathering art ideas and gathering quilt ideas and planning ideas, and guarantee every year for about the last 20, we meet to create together for that week. We'd like to do it every week of the year, but we save that week no matter what to make sure the creating happens. But more on the daily version, where do you get some creating time in? Is it in playing the piano? Is it in doing something on an art pad like I might? What is it that you do to create space for yourself? And in that space, how do you create? Martina just joined us, so I'm going to ask her first. That's what you get for coming in late, girlfriend. You get to go first. All right. Good morning. Sarah, if you make sure she's unmuted, I'd appreciate it. You're up, I think. Nope, you're not up. It turns out we just put you on the spot and then we don't even give you a microphone. What do you know? It's still just not coming up. Right. All right, Martina, you're up.
Are we there?
Good to go. You're there. Thank you for being patient.
Good morning. No, never a problem. Morning, everyone. I schedule time for creativity. I find my most creative times are usually early in the morning and late in the evening. I also keep a pad by the side of the bed. I frequently wake up with either having vivid dreams or solving some problem that was kind of thorny the day before, so I can write it down before it's completely gone. Again, I have to schedule. There's no seasonal flow to it for me, although I think in the fall and in the spring I probably am a little bit more creative than in the dark months here.
You know, that's an interesting point that you bring up about seasons. For me, I am exceptionally creative in January every year. You can count on it. It's a time of year where something about the Christmas holidays having passed and having a lot of dark time in the winter, I just get into this high creative mode. You know, businesses are born, products are made. My house gets more decorated during that time. Dinners get more fabulous. There's about 8 weeks in there from January to February that I'm always very high energy. I'm always very high creative, and the more I create, the happier I like it. And then I have to remind myself in March, April, and May that creating is fun. And it doesn't have to have such high energy to it. It can just be consistently for the fun of it, for the love of it. And then again in June when the sunshine comes and the blooms are coming out and there's swimming pools and all the things I love to do physically, I find I'm high creative again, that I want to do things with the things I love. So if I love swimming, I may want to create, you know, a better place to swim, or I want to create things to go with my swimming, or to make it fun tasks like shooting basketballs while we're swimming, or jumping off the diving board. So you know, that play kind comes into space. For me personally, during every day, there is a space that I create, whether that's creating songs at the piano, whether that's creating stories on paper, whether that is recording something as a class for fun, not for pay, not for somebody's enrichment because they made me or I had to for a contract, but because I love sharing. That creating is fun to me, but it's also a serious part of my de-stressor. When I was in high school and college and I took heavy-duty course loads, I played the piano for 3 to 4 hours a day, and I would create songs and I would make up music and I would play the classics, you know, differently at a different rhythm or a different speed, because that creativity unleashed the pent-up frustration of trying to get through that much academia all day long every day. And so it was a practice part of how I survived that period of my life when I had a lot of high expectations for perfection from parents and others. And at the same time, I needed a place to release all that steam, and I wasn't much of a runner, and I wasn't much of an exerciser in those days, so my create was not splashing mud puddles, it was pounding it out on the keyboard. But you know what? It's fun to pound on the keyboard when there's not stress, too. That's just fun to me. Lucy Ann Ma, we're so glad to have you with us today, and I think, Sarah, if you'll pop her to unmute. I'm having difficulty with the unmute button this morning. We'll put Lucy in space. She's in Arkansas here today, too. We've been teaching her what the South is, and we love that because it's good to have a Yankee in the house, and at the same time, it's very fun to see her in person. Good morning, Lucy.
Good morning. It's great to be in Arkansas. Huge living room right now. I have many favorite way of creating, and it's spontaneous. It is not scheduled, and to make my space beautiful. So my family and I, we moved to a new home in May, and so just dealing with different colors, figuring out what looks best, different pieces, trying different collections of pictures, figuring out what goes where, and it's definitely still in process. Even outside, this will be our first spring.
Lucy, I'm going to have to interrupt you. I'm sorry, because you're so far from the internet, it's just not broadcasting. And so I'm going to have to pop you out for a minute and bring you closer to where an internet source is, to a MiFi source, because it's just not broadcasting for us. Sarah, You are a mom of 3 kids. How does creativity and having time for creativity with your children work?
You know, I find that creativity, honestly, it soothes all the chaos, if you will, by bringing in some fun, whether we have a dance party or whether we're creating like in the kitchen or whether we're playing with Play-Doh or whether we are doing whatever we're doing, whether we're doing stick figures or other drawings, in between homework breaks, or creating music or singing silly songs. All of those things allow for more communication. You know, it opens the lines of communication because you have that time in creating together. It also allows for, you know, like I said, the stress level to come down. And it opens up, for us, it's opened up some business opportunities, you know, brainstorming on business ideas or taking their creativity and figuring out how they can make a profit from that. Not always does creativity need to lead to profit, but that has been a way for my children to be able to find income streams at a young age, as well as creativity in finance or creativity in, you know, how to get friends together or how to create a trip together, you know, how to figure out how to afford it or how to make the budget work differently. Creativity is the life stream, if you will, of lots and lots of good things happening in your world, whether it's relationally or whether it's financially or health-wise or otherwise.
You know, one of the things I'd like us to share with today, because we have so many gifted and talented girls who come in and have conversations. In fact, I get more DMs a week than I get public conversations because everybody thinks they're the only one. You know, one of the things about humanity is that we believe we're the only one who faces the hardships, the negativity, or the difficulties we face in life. And one of the reasons Dare Whimsy exists is to bring out into the light that each gifted girl has challenges, and that there are ways and methods that we can help each other with the stories at the well, as Gail would say, of our own travels and our own adventures of giftedness. Because you see, we're not alone. In some hemisphere, you might be alone because you live in an area where there's just not a lot of gifted girls, and that happens. I was raised in a town where there were a few of us, but there weren't many. And I teach many children in rural states where they may not be recognized as academically gifted, and so they may be the only child in a gifted program because they didn't have a system that identified more children or had talent pool. And so they haven't really had anybody who thinks quickly like they do or who thinks differently as they do. And they feel alone or unique because of that, and not particularly in a good way sometimes. They feel like a freak. And so I wanted to bring a place called Dare Whimsy together where people could dare to be who they are, who could dare to think differently, to dare the whimsy of being who they are, and not be afraid of the retribution of that. One of the things that I know of all the people on this panel is that we all struggle to be who we are consistently in a way that's life-sustaining for us. We let life get in the way. We have children or husbands or dogs or relationships or work situations that make it easier to tell yourself, oh, I don't need to create today. That would be too busy, too messy, too expensive, too nonsensical, too enjoyable sometimes. I've heard someone tell me recently she hadn't earned the right to enjoy that time yet. She hadn't done enough work. And I said, poof, excuse me, when you enjoy your life first, sometimes you can get the work done twice as fast. Because if you've not had a fun quotient, if you've not had a creating quotient, the chances of you continuing to be in the space just isn't that way. It's part of it. It's always that way. So I would like you to talk about some of the personal things you've had to overcome in your conversation on how you talk yourself out of creative opportunities, and how are you doing self-talk differently to keep yourself back in the space. Sarah, would you mind sharing that one first, and then we'll go popcorn around if you would.
Honestly, I find that it's a daily process because I have that high level of saying, well, I didn't do X, Y, and Z, so I don't, quote, deserve that time out. And it goes back to conversations with myself that reaffirm that not only do I deserve that time, but I also need that time so that I can do all the other things, you know, just that conversation internally that says, no, this is going to allow everything else to get better if it's more stressful or whatever's happening. So I think being willing to have the conversation with yourself that affirms that creativity is important and that the time is now and that you deserve to take that time is key to continuing that creativity if you're in that place where you haven't allowed that. Other people just, it's such a part of their life that they maybe don't need that have that conversation. But for me, that's still something that I sometimes decide to do so that I can continue with the creativity. I'm going to go ahead and pop it over to Gail so she can share as well.
All right, Gail.
It's so interesting because I never felt I was a creative person, or if my creativity was too frightening. The things that I created would scare other people. I've always been a big dreamer. As Martina said, I would have vivid Technicolor dreams every night. And the thought of expressing those in any way was kind of scary to me because I knew that it would frighten other people. And so for most of my life, I kind of tapped that side down and would only let it out in little pieces. So now that I've given myself permission to let it out in any way it comes out, and just as Sarah said, it's an ongoing, everyday thing, but I'm getting better at it, and especially since I created my play, Calling All Mothers to the Well. As Sweetie says, I recognized how isolated I was. Whereas women generations ago, they would get together the first thing in the morning to do something communally. And we don't do that so much anymore. So that communal thing helps to keep everyone asked, what are you doing today? What did you think about today? What did you dream about last night? And so now that we've got Dare Whimsy, we've got these resources to help ourselves and to help other creative girls from 5 to 95 understand that they're not alone. Well, I'll speak for myself. That has helped me tremendously, and I'm sure it will help hundreds, if not thousands, of other gifted girls to get into this same space of recognizing, accepting, understanding, and not be fearful of their creativity anymore.
I love that answer, Gail, and I think it helps all of us to have community. One of the things I want to be clear about for those who are listening is Dare Whimsy is a community for gifted and talented girls of all ages. Our desire is to be a base support community for information, for personal awareness of your giftedness and the things that gifted girls go through, for resources to go to learn different things. But we are not a competition ground. This is not a place to come and say you have to be like this girl or that girl, or you have to write like this one or create rockets like that one. Creativity and gifted girls, gosh, there's just a lot of worldly desire to make us competitors. And likewise, many of us are built from birth out that we just naturally love to compete. But part of the Dare Whimsy conversation is talking more about the choices you have and how you think about your own giftedness and how you choose the values of what you put into your gifted life adventure. Because it becomes very easy when you're in isolation to believe your own Kool-Aid, to think that nobody likes you, to think that no one gets you, to think that you're most special than anybody, and to drink the Kool-Aid of saying, oh me, I'm this, or I'm better than other people. I've dealt with lots of classroom girls that because they thought quickly, they valued themselves in all facets of their life as better than other people. That's an immaturity, because sometimes, somewhere, there's going to be someone who's faster than you, and if your whole self-esteem is based on being the fastest in your little bitty classroom where there's no competition for you, man, is that a bad crash when you get to a college or to a high school or to a sports team that has more experience than you. We assimilate so many things as gifted girls, but experience is really, truly one of the best measures of where you're at, because most of us are seeking mastery, not competition. We're seeking to live our own life to our best intention for our own self, not somebody else's version of what our life should be. And that's something that takes conversation and takes finding out, oh, you do that too? And hearing that, oh gosh, you overwork or you underwork or you don't even attempt because you're afraid it won't be perfect. I do that too sometimes. and hearing the conversations as we gather here Between Us Girls, hearing the conversations as we took photographs in person with Between Us Girls, we heard a lot of thinking, and sometimes that thinking was great and healthy thinking, and sometimes we heard thinking that was perhaps indicative of isolation, that the person had drank their own Kool-Aid, and they couldn't see themselves as they are to other people. You know, we reflect out to the world what we perceive to be, but what others see is not always what we see ourselves to be. I know that I'm just amazed when I see Lucy and Edith and Martina in person, and Leslie and all the people I work with. They have so many gifts and talents, and I see Gail fix things that I wouldn't even touch with a 10-foot pole, and I put it in my mouth and think it's fabulous. She's amazingly gifted in that space. But at the same time, they reflect back to me things I don't see in myself that are of value. And I think that's part of the true value of Dare Whimsy, is that we come to a place where maybe not everybody's like you, but I bet between the 2,300 who visit each site each week, and you look through the comments, you'll start finding people that resonate, or maybe people who are doing what you want to do, or maybe you've done what they want to do. You know, this isn't a top-down organization. This is not a place where these 6 people are on high and everybody else is supposed to be a listener or audience pretender. This is a community, and that means everyone has something to bring to the table, and the table has room for all. We just want you to be in a positive place here, because creating sometimes is not a positive thing. Sometimes it can be a very dark thing. You're dealing with anger. You're dealing with upset. But the way we handle that anger, upset, we need to work on decorum with that. That means respecting all people at the table and making sure that when we're doing that creative process, we're not attacking people. And I think that's an important thing to be said out loud, because so many times we create to invoke something in someone else, an emotion or a response or an engagement, and that's good. That's what poetry is. That's what writing is. We do things intentionally to evoke things in others. But to create creatively, consistently, you also have to be aware of the repercussions. If you create on a wall with a spray can paint, there may be a problem with the repercussion for creating consistently, and that gets you in trouble if it's on the wrong wall. So, good morning, Miss Bobby. I see you've just popped in from El Dorado, Arkansas. We're talking about creating consistently and how important it is for the gifted girl. The question I have for you is, what are the things that get in the way of your creating, and how have you overcome them? And the rest of you on the panel, please be thinking of that answer, because everyone, I'd like you to identify what are some things you've struggled with and how did you overcome it to get creativity back in your life today. Good morning, Bobby. It's your turn.
Good morning. I think my biggest thing is a lot of my creativity I have not yet turned into a business or turned into something that makes money for me. And so, as you can see, I'm sitting in an office here today working for someone else, and this is not a creative outlet. This is a job that pays the bills. So what I'm learning to do is I'm learning to turn my creative outlet into my business. In the meantime, I have to remember that it's very important when I go home to do something creative, whether it be writing, whether it be getting some new curriculum together to teach, something like that. I just have to remember to keep my creative outlet open in the places where I can, because it's not real easy whenever you're trying to do plumbing work to be creative in that. So it's just a matter of remembering when I leave here, I'm not too tired to create. That's where my energy comes from.
You know, Bobby, I think I'd be a little scared if you're getting creative with the plumbing over there, because I know you're a high creator. I've seen you in children's ministry, and I've read your writing, and I know that when you get the idea to be creative, whoa, Nelly, it may be a ride. So I think I would almost be afraid to know that you're getting creative with the plumbing, for sure. It's just
I'm
not. It's just lots of fun things that go with that. Martina, what are some of the things that have kept you from being, or at least tried to talk you out of being your creative self, and how have you overcome them?
Well, I think it goes back to what Gail and Sarah said earlier. It's a matter of having, for me, it's a matter of having an ongoing conversation about what I deserve to do. And as Bobby just said, you know, there's some jobs that we don't like doing, even if we do them well. But we have to somehow recognize that those are tools to get us to the time or the money or whatever to create. But yeah, I grew up as a freak, first in family and then in school. But you know, and that didn't do wonders for my self-esteem, but what I've realized as a growing adult is I have to learn to give myself credit for the things that I have done successfully, and that usually gives me some buoyance. And like Bobby said, for me, what I like to do and what I do for an outlet primarily is writing. So I usually write in the evening when I get home from work. I write in the morning before I go. I'll write at lunchtime if I have a few minutes.
Love that. You know, I'm a writer as well, and that is a stress relief as well as a creative thing for me. I was a teacher in a classroom for many years, and guess what? In the teacher in the classroom role, they expect you to like be the adult. And I have this sincere problem when I'm creating about acting like my age. And so we've had all kinds of fun. I had to start sitting during people taking tests because, you know, teachers give tests, and children are usually expected to sit in their seats while the teacher's quiet. And that's one of the hardest things I have to do is sit and be quiet. And so I'd have to do things like imagine there was a balloon on their head and it would blow up while they're taking the test, and if they knew the answer, the light would turn green, and if they did know the answer, the light would turn yellow and be afraid. And if they didn't have the right answer, it would turn the balloon in their head into a red balloon, and if they had 2 or 3 questions in a row, it would pop. You know, so I had to do creative thinking, which is sometimes all you can do. Some of us have had experiences with children or ourselves where you're in an unhealthy environment. Maybe you're with a boss or a principal or a companion group that they're just not nice people at that moment, and you can't exit. You can't just quit your family. You can't just quit your classroom. You can't just quit the bully crowd at school. And creating creatively at that point matters so much because you see, you can go somewhere in your head to make it a more fun thing. One of my favorite targets, I had a principal one year that was so mean. I mean, really, he had a bad day every day, and he took it out on everybody around him. Loved to do it. If he saw you being happy, his goal was to pop your bubble. So I had him on that guy like on the cartoons where he held the big musket. You remember we saw the musket guy that went to shoot a wabbit? And so I imagined him as the wabbit shooter. And so I was always trying to get down the hall away from the wabbit shooter. And likewise, I had a gun, and it was shooting smiles back at him. And so I spent all of my time making some effort to make him smile, to try and add some happiness and sunshine to his day. And to me, that was creative play. I studied him like he was a scientific experience. When did he ever smile? And it turned out he smiled when golf balls were involved. So I started hiding golf balls in the school. When he made his early morning rounds to check on the naughty kids and pick them up to take them to the office, he would find a golf ball here or there and around the square, and it intrigued him for a while. And then it got him tickled when they'd roll out of funny places at him, like the drainage ditch. I got a kid to go up on the ceiling roof with one of our custodians who was working on building supplies, and they rolled a golf ball down a drainage pipe at him one day, and it made him giggle because he didn't know where it was all coming from. You know, there are creative ways to use your creativity. Have to be pretty judicious about where you use it and when it's appropriate, because it's not appropriate to spray paint a wall. It's not appropriate to invoke creative things into place where someone's trying to teach, and they need order for that instruction to go out for people who don't understand the interruptive processes. Kids in classrooms get into a lot of trouble who are high creative because they get bored really easy, and they may go into their creative play, which confuses kids who don't think as fast. So there's all kinds of ways that creating creatively is wonderful, but we also need to know how to overcome the desire to be disruptive and interruptive, and a few of you know exactly what I'm talking about. But in my own life, I've had to learn how to have this overabundance of creativity. I really do. It just flows from me, and it doesn't seem to matter if I'm tired or if I'm rested. I just think 100,000 directions at once for how to do something fun or how to create it differently. You know, fonts are one of my hang-ups. I look at fonts, the way letters are drawn. And every magazine, every poster, every billboard can be a creative experience where my head rewrites it to a different way to see how it would respond in my head. So I have to turn those buttons off sometimes because it doesn't effectively make my day go through. What do you have to overcome to play? Miss Edith, I know that you have definitely got a lot of responsibilities in your life, but you seem to manage how to play often. How do you do the overcoming, and what do you have to talk to yourself about? I have to talk to myself about I deserve it too.
Oh, yes. Looking at, do I deserve it? Have I met all my responsibilities? Have I got enough of my checklist done? Those are the things that come up. And yet, as we've been talking here all as a group, is that it's really important to be able to take creative time out. Even if that means just breathing. and paying attention to the breath. That sounds really simple. Is that really creation? Yes, it's creation of a space. It's creation of release. It's creation of opportunity so that I can go ahead and move forward. I schedule things. I plan things ahead. I give myself, as we've discussed before, some margin by having things done ahead of time so that I have time for spontaneity and that serendipitous things that may happen. Or knowing that I have this emotional roller coaster, so I may need time just to doodle, to draw mandalas, to crochet, to allow my mind, all those racing thoughts we've been talking about, so they can just race all around and not have to be collected at the moment. So, yeah, scheduling that time, planning ahead sounds contradictory maybe to being able to be creative, but then that allows me the space and to be able to be spontaneous at the moment. So it's fun, but sometimes it'll take some planning and also permission to say, I don't have to be responsible to everybody all the time. It's okay to be responsible to me, which means play.
Amen. You know, part of it for me is permission to play a little, because there's some things I do, like sewing an outfit or planning a mural, that take 2 or 3 hours of time at a time, and then I have to do several days in a row. There are other things, like my thumbprints, that I can do in 3 minutes, and except for having a really inky thumb for the rest of the day, which sometimes creates interesting conversations, it doesn't take a lot. I can do it in completeness right then. And part of it is recognizing the value of incomplete. You know, I like to finish projects. I am project driven. I want to finish something. I don't want to start and continue process. But there is value in process, different perspectives that come up. When I used to teach behavior disorder gifted kids, which is really, these are kids who got the label of behavior disorder gifted because they were bored. 90% of the time, by the time they were in an appropriate classroom, they didn't have behavior problems anymore. They were in a classroom before that wasn't aware of their creative needs and their gifted needs. They didn't recognize that they were a high thinker with low skills. That happens a lot, where a child thinks at a very high ability, but they somehow daydreamed out of their way or missed school or maybe changed schools when something was taught, or they were skipped a grade, and so they were really smart verbally to take the test, but they didn't know how to do it in actuality, so it became very frustrating for them, and they'd rather be bad than stupid. That happens a lot. That happens a lot with gifted kids, is that we assume because they talk so well that they can do everything so well, and it turns out they're just like everybody else, that if you haven't learned the skill, you may can talk about how to paint a portrait, but you may not know how to draw a portrait. There's a big difference in being able to verbally explain that. And, you know, sometimes it's just too hard to be there. Ashley was saying that sometimes it's just too painful to be present, to be in that space of doing it in a process point. And I have that pain sometimes. Sometimes I want to do something beautiful, like a portrait or a landscape, but that would take me days. And my time in the hotel gives me minutes. And so I've had to learn to be adjustable. I had to learn to change modalities. I had to learn to change mediums. I had to learn to recognize that maybe this is a planning stage for the landscape I'm going to paint when I have the time. And to take value in that. Sometimes I don't like to plan. I have to plan a lot of things in my life. So sometimes I just like to go splat, there it is, and I'm finished. But it also has been a great learning experience throughout 50 years of learning to recognize that when I enjoy the planning of something, the actual planning of it sometimes is more enjoyable than the actual event. You know, I have time to enjoy the process of what I'm looking, and when we hit the outcome too, man, it's just a beautiful place when you do a plan and then you see it come to life like it has this weekend. It's been very fun to see the plans for yesterday's filming and taping of commercials and small products come into fruition on the camera on the video today, and to look at it and say, wow, we thought about this last summer, and here's the proof of that pudding. You know, it's really fun to do that. But likewise, creating consistently is something you have a right to do. Did you hear me? You have a right to create. Now, you don't have a right to create on somebody else's space. If you're being hired at a job, then it's not your job to create at that job, and you need to do that outside of work hours. You don't have a right to take over a math class and do your creating in the middle of your teacher's instruction. That's a boundary call. So part of the creating consistently is also creating boundaries within your life that work. You know, I can tell you all day long that it's all right to create, and if you go tell your English teacher that Sweetie said or the school mom said that I can create every day and should do so in the middle of your English test, you're going to be out to lunch for that grade. They're going to tell you about Miss Sweetie doesn't work here and all kinds of things. But if someone in your life is telling you consistently that what you do in creating is not of value, that you are a lesser person because you are creating, that your creating is not good enough, I encourage you to go in your head and say, you don't have the right to say that. Now, you may be in a dangerous situation where if you said that to the person who's bullying you, if you're a child, that may be a scary place to answer them back, and I do not encourage you to answer the person who's being mean to you back. But go to a trusted source, go to a counselor at school, go to your minister, go to an older brother or sister whom you trust, and help them understand that somebody's really talking about your core, and it's not okay. Because that's a good thing to do when someone is telling you that you, the person, are not okay. Because you know what? You're okay just the way you are. It may be your behavior needs to change a little bit, or the perception of when you do your behavior needs to change. But each of us have the right to create innately, and we have the right to be who we are. And that does not mean your behavior is who you are, because acting out is different than being. You see, some of us have learned to do things and we act out. We talk to others in a certain way while we're creating, or we create ugly pictures. That's an act out. And sometimes an ugly picture is necessary. That's the privacy of your own room, the privacy of your own notebook. It's really good to get that anger out. But it also sometimes is good to tear up that anger and put it in the trash can because you're through with it now, to let it go. Okay? So I want to make sure, I know we're all adults here on the panel today, but I promise you we have a lot of little children who are watching right now, and I don't want to forget to say the boundaries that an adult's experience might have taught them. But a child's experience, even a tween or a high schooler, may not have thought through that, yes, it's great to write a diary entry where you're angry and mad and hostile and all the rest of it, but it might be that you need to let go of that, tear up the page, use your anger, rip it up, and throw it away to release that anger when you're creating things of anger. Sometimes it's not. If you go to museums, you can see museum pieces where it's certainly angry all over the place, and they actually have it in a museum. But as a child, particularly if it's directed at a person, you could put yourself in danger's alley by putting that on paper or on a canvas. So be very aware of your choices of how you communicate that anger creatively. All right, let's make sure we're careful about what we do to ourselves and from ourselves. All right. What have you had to overcome, Miss Lucy? I think you're in a place now where the internet's going to work for you. What have you had to overcome to give yourself space to create? And Lucy loves fun, and I love the way she creates opportunities for fun, so I know that this is a subject she can speak to. I'm sorry, Lucy, it's still not pulling you. It's just not. You may have to come into the room where I am for it to pull. What Lucy was beginning was she has learned to talk about the ants in her head, the automatic negative thinking responses. She calls them ants as a biblical counselor. I'm going to invite her to come to the room where I'm at, and she can actually take my spot and have this conversation because it's a very strong conversation. I'd like for you to hear it as you think about creating creatively. Lucy, if you'd like to come take my spot and you can have a seat and then have that conversation. We're working on a MiFi today, and I'm just not sure it's pulling well enough for anybody else to speak in another room. So let me grab that, and I'll set out of space and let her have it for just a moment.
Hi, everybody. I am the school marm. No, really, as Lucy, one thing I had to learn to do was to get rid of the ants in my head, the automatic negative thinking. And I grew up, like many people did, hearing some really negative talk, from childhood and onward. And I would repeat that stuff to myself. I didn't intentionally repeat it to myself, but that's what I did. I wasn't like out to get myself. I was just on automatic, just saying to myself what others had said to me. And I learned to ask myself, is this true? And by and large, it isn't true. If someone says, Lucy, like when I was in 8th grade, they said I was a space cadet. I'm sure I was kind of spacey. But name calling is never good. And so I started thinking to myself, I am spacey. I must be really stupid. But is that true? And I learned to ask myself those kinds of questions. And for me as a biblical counselor, I learned to line it up with God's word. So not only is it true, but is it noble? Is it right? Is it pleasing? I mean, should anybody be calling themselves names? And so through a lot of, I guess I would say, looking at what God says about me, that anybody who's in Christ is amazing to him, is loved and blessed, and so many other amazing things he has for us, that I decided to believe him instead of the lies, and I turned off the ants. I got rid of the ants. And I'm going to let Sweetie come on back. So here she comes. We're switching spots.
So many times what we're talking about in creating creatively is what we tell ourselves. You know, one of my favorite things that happened recently is I went to a gentleman who paints, and I bought his painting. And it's a beautiful painting of snow-capped trees that sits now in my office. But as I was going through his paintings, he said, "Oh, I don't even know why you would like that. I don't even understand what you would value about that." And you know, it was very cute. When I took the painting home and I hung it on the wall, and I took a picture to show him how proud I was to have it in my home, and I paid for it, he said, "That does look good. I never knew. I just never considered that I was really that good a painter. But man, when I see it in your space, it's amazing." You know, those automatic negative thoughts, as Lucy mentioned, are so important to identify and to recognize in your creative process. Because when we begin, something may not be where it ends. I know that one of my friends is also named Lucy, not this Lucy, and she just began to paint. And she was just amazed that part of the painting instruction process was to teach herself to cover what she didn't like and start over again. And sometimes by the time they've started over again 4 or 5 times, that's what adds the depth to the final piece. That those layers of red paint and yellow paint and brown paint and white paint gives the patina of the top coat of the final product so much depth and richness that it adds amazing levels of expertise and beauty, really true value. And our lives are that way too in creative. Maybe the first time you make a Smurf cupcake, the Smurf blue came out looking like a purple blueberry. Maybe the next time you created a different color by adding less drops of the food coloring. Maybe the first time you tried a vegan meal, it was beautifully put together, and then you added a little bit of mushroom sauce and the whole thing turned gray. I did that the other day. A beautiful recipe with red peppers and yellow peppers and white potatoes and red potatoes, and it was fantastic looking till I added the last ingredients, but I lost the main ingredient conversation in creating, and it said, "Don't put the gravy on all of it, serve it as a separate sauce." Well, I poured it over the top trying to save a little time, and guess what? That created a big old mess. It tasted great, but we had to kind of look away while we ate it. And sometimes that's the way our trying out things is. And there was much learning in that process. It didn't waste my time. It didn't waste the food. Even if it had, it was a learning process. And creative is so much about learning. I love to go into a classroom where a child has not been succeeding. I love to be able to give the teacher permission to let the child go play even if they didn't do their work. And I love to see what happens when they come in from running and playing and sit down and eagerly try to learn something that before they wouldn't try at all. And suddenly, like a light switched on in their head, often the instruction takes place and they learn. We need an amount of time to just play, to create, to have our mind not trestled down to schedules and outcomes, but to explore, to be curious, to pretend, to imagine. And creativity allows that. I encourage you all to have that space in your life. We are the women of Dare Whimsy. On Thursday, you're going to see creating consistently our best tips from each of us individually in a sister post on the website that tells about how we personally do it in our lives. We're everything from medical doctors to counselors to social workers to playwrights to attorneys, you name it. We have got all levels of learning going on there, to artists like my daughter, who's not with us today, who's Madison, who's a graphic designer, and she's a product maker, to Ashley Lico, who's a tremendous artist. We have people in all walks of life, all walks of education, and all ages sharing how they create consistently in their life. I hope you'll join us there at dearwhimsy.com. Each Wednesday, we're here as a group. Sometimes it's 4, sometimes it's 6, sometimes it's 10. We're almost always here, but I guarantee you the conversation is individual, and I think there'll be someone you relate to in your journey of adventures of giftedness. Thank you for joining us.